We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Yud Bet, Amud Bet, 6 lines down from the top of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as Zchut Refuah Shlema for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, the girl in our community that needs serious Refuah Shlema, for Nisim Ben Miriam and Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid. All of them should be Zochit to have Refuah Shlema Bezat Hashem. Amen. This Amud is also being learned as a Zchut for Aliyat Neshama of Abraham Ben Ezra, whose Yortzeit we just had. This Amud is been dedicated, this week's learning of the community has been dedicated graciously by the Dayan family, by Shei family, by Cohen families. Should be ultimate Zchut for all their mishpachot. Bezat Hashem. Amen. Okay, so we are continuing on the items that are kasher for schach of the sukkah, and the Gemara now mentions the last item that we discussed was whether or not you could do with arrows that are not completed, the metal piece is not put in, depending on how exactly it is formatted. It could be kasher, it could be pasul, depending on if you have a hole, a bet kibul inside the wood or not. And now the Gemara says, Amar Rabba Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Sichecha ba'anise pishtan psula, behusni pishtan kesheram, behushni pishtan eni yodea. Now, before we get into explaining this, you have to understand that the flax, which would be turned into linen, it had a process that would be taken from where it grew until it was ready to be threaded to be made a beged pishtan. Now the process, simply put, involved taking the bundles of flax and soaking them in the water, and then after soaking you have to dry them. This kind of like separates those items that you want to crush and separate from the actual flax. Then they would put them through a beating process to crush those berries, those shells that don't belong. And after that, they would comb them to separate everything that would be unnecessary, and only then they would put it inside a tanur, inside an oven to kind of like cook it and be melaben. It would soften it, it would turn the color a little bit, and then it would be ready for threading process. That's how pishtan would be processed in the time of Chazal. Now, the Gemara says, if you have anise pishtan is the outcome of all of this at the very end, when it's ready to be threaded, that's anise pishtan. And that is mekabel tumah. That already has become part and parcel of what a kli is made out of, and therefore is mekabel tumah. Now, a bundle of flax in the very beginning, when you take it off where it grows, is not mekabel tumah. So in the beginning of the process, it is something that grows from the ground. It's not mekabel tumah. It's not attached to the ground. So it's definitely kasher. And that is husni pishtan. Anise pishtan are ready to go. You could take them right now and make threads of linen from. That is pasul. It's already mekabel tumah. It's also grown from the ground. It's detached. But it's mekabel tumah, therefore you can't use them as schach. So anise pishtan, no. Husni pishtan, yes. How about when you catch this bundle somewhere in the middle? It has been, for instance, soaked and dried, but it hasn't been crushed. Is that good enough? Or is also considered mekabel tumah? That, or the steps around that, it will be hushni pishtan. So says the Gemara, Sichecha ba'anise pishtan psula. If you do with the ready product, which we call anise pishtan, is pasul. Your schach is mekabel tumah and therefore invalidated. Behusni pishtan is keshera. If you have it unprocessed, completely unprocessed, when you have cut it off from the ground, that would be from the tree, that would be kasher. Behushni pishtan eni yodea. Says Rabbi Bar Chana from Rabbi Yochanan, I don't know what the halacha would be with hushni pishtan. Now the Gemara says vehushni atzman eni yodea ma nafshach. And the hushni, I don't know what exactly it means, says Rabbi Bar Chana. Idayik velo nafis. Is it referring to the stage after the crushing, but before you comb and separate the unwanted particles from the bundle? And that is considered hushni. But prior to the crushing process, the beating process, it will be still considered good to go, even though that you soaked it already and all of that. Aval tari velo dayik husni karile. If you already soaked it and dried it, as long as it's before the beating process to separate the shells and the berries, is considered already husni and it's kasher. Or dilma, or maybe tari velo dayik nami husni karile. Maybe the mere fact that you already soaked it and dried it, that already is considered hushni, even without having to crush and to beat the shells out of it. Amar Rav Yehuda. So this Gemara leaves it as a question that is not necessarily answered in the Gemara, but we get the point that in flax, there is a process, and the process turns something that is not mekabel tumah to something that is mekabel tumah. So again, this is something that we spoke about before, that sometimes certain things that we have could become mekabel tumah, even though that they would be considered quote unquote kosher schach. We spoke about Rav Moshe's tshuva that talks about the window blinds that they had about 50, 60 years ago when he wrote the tshuva, and he writes that it will be a problem. And again, as we mentioned before, many people may read the tshuva and not understand fully what the mitziut was. And back in the day, they had a strip of cloth that would go on both sides of the window blinds, that was made out of bamboos basically, and would attach them together to nicely drop and fold. And this was on both sides of it, or maybe three, and back and forth on two sides. So that attachment of a cloth to this blind would make the entire thing mekabel tumah, because the cloth is mekabel tumah, right? And it gets into deeper halachot of what if the cloth is synthetic? Synthetic is not mekabel tumah, right? But if you make a cloth out of synthetic material, maybe it does become mekabel tumah, says Rab Ben Zion Abba Shaul, speaking about the synthetic talit katans that you find in the market, whether it's kasher, it's not kasher. So he gets into a whole area of halacha. Also, what we have nowadays in Home Depot and Lowe's, that the very thin, cheaper side of bamboos that are reeds that are attached together with a metal beam inside, with a metal string inside. Is the metal string considered pshutek li matechot, or is it mekabel tumah? Because if it is mekabel tumah, and you attach that with even one simple stitch to something that is not mekabel tumah, the entire thing becomes mekabel tumah, and then your schach will become pasul. So here is another example the Gemara gives, that the item itself that is kasher, if you process it in such a way that now becomes mekabel tumah, then it's pasul. Parenthetically, the bamboo mats, in some point in time was very questionable, because the primary reason that they would make these bamboo mats was to sit on them. They were considered like a rock, basically. In many places in the world, still they're used for that kavanah, and really depends why they were made. If you have a place in which people actually use these for sitting on them, not for making dividers or shade, then it actually would be mekabel tum'ah, and the entire thing would be pasul for schach as well. So really, the same thing that you could have. It's not surprising that you just soak this. It looks still the same. You soaked it, you dried it, and now it's mekabel. Yeah, I mean, it's a process of making an item that's mekabel tum'ah, and maybe at some point in that process, it already had turned into a davar mekabel tum'ah. It wouldn't be surprising, this she'elah of the Gemara of hushni pishtan, because it would again be not different much than a bamboo mat that you made, and your kavanah is for something, and even though that it looks exactly the same as the next one, this one is pasul and the other one would be kasher. So it says.
So that could vary in one country versus another of what the intention of the.
Yes, if it's made for an item that you sit on, then it is considered mekabel tumah. Versus here in the United States, then now, normally speaking, whatever you find in the market is made for making dividers usually. Either as dividers or for making shade, either vertically or horizontally, and therefore it would be another question, unless again, you have the metal strings. If you consider those mekabel tumah, then it would become a problem. So also the same thing is with the strings, that if you pay attention, many of the Jewish stores that they sell schach, the bamboo pieces are attached together either with bamboo pieces, the very thin ones that they made them to string, basically to cut them to very narrow, thin pieces, and that's what's going through, or with other items that are not strings, versus what you have in the stores that even if they're not mekabel tum'ah, there are strings of synthetic material, or in the beginning also they used to have the fishing rod, the fishing string that would go in between the things. So that also stopped, because even though that the fishing string is not mekabel tum'ah, but it also is not kasher for schach, which is something that we haven't gotten to. If davar ha'ma'amid, if something that holds the schach together has to be an item that's kasher for sichuch, for schach itself, right? Now, if you say that you need a davar hakasher lesichuch, then a fishing string is not kasher for schach because it's plastic. But if you don't need it to be kasher lesichuch, you just don't want it to be mekabel tumah, plastic is not mekabel tumah, and that would be fine. So that explains to you different levels of the bamboo mats that you find in the market. You know, those who rely on buying from the stores, even though that's a string that is woven together, is one level, and then you have the fishing string ones that's certainly a better level than that, but still not as good as the ones that now are very prevalent in the past few years, that the material that keeps the bamboo pieces together by itself is bamboo, made out of bamboo, and it's completely kasher for making a schach. So says the Gemara.
How about cotton string?
Again, that gets into all of those questions. What is considered mekabel tumah? What is not considered mekabel tumah? But here again, you have flax string, right? That would be, even prior to making a thread, would be considered mekabel tumah. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda, Hani Shusi v'Shvasri Mesachechin behu. Now, these are types of thorn bushes. They have leaves as well, but they are in the family of thorn bushes. So says Rav Yehuda, these things you could make schach with them. Take a bunch of them, throw them on the schach, it will be kasher. Abaya says, not so fast. Beshushi mesachin, beshvasri lo mesachin. You could do with the first one, but not with the second one. Why? Says the Gemara, my tama, kevan de sari rechaihu, shavik lehu, v'nafik. Now, sorry, this is, I jumped the gun. The next one is really the types of thorn bushes. This one is actually vegetation. They're vegetation that are not edible to human beings, because if it was machal adam, if he was edible for people, it would be mekabel tum'ah, and that would be out of the question. So these are vegetation, but they are not edible for people. People don't eat them. So therefore, you would ask, well, for sure it should be kasher. For sure it should be kasher. So it says, Abaye, no, shvasri is pasul. Why is it pasul? Because it has a very bad odor to it. And when you make a schach with that and you go sit inside, after 2 minutes you want to just get out of there. You don't want to stay in the sukkah. You leave the sukkah. You go. Therefore, Chazal did not allow us to make schach with them, says Abaye. So technically speaking, there would be kasher because it is growing from the ground. It is detached. It's not edible for people. So therefore, it's not mekabel tuma, and yet it would be pasul, says Abaye, because of the bad odor. This we have also with Itran in Perek Bamim in Masechet Shabbat, the second Perek of Masechet Shabbat, that you can't light with a fuel that smells bad. Right? Right? We don't do it because it's not kavod Shabbat. You put that in and then you can't sit by the table anymore, and you're going to leave. So therefore, Chazal said you cannot light with it, even though that it is a fuel that burns nicely and smoothly. Still, you can't do it. So it says.
Could you use it for the walls? Use it for the walls. I mean, the same smell is going to be in the sukkah, but for the walls, would it be?
It will be the same thing.
It would also be possible.
Yeah. Not because it's pasul again, and mesachachin, you should not be doing it, right? If you did the walls, is the sukkah pasul? If you want to go for 2 minutes and eat something, not necessarily, but again, Abaye says that would be midrabanan, something that we don't want you to do. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava, Hani hizmi vehigi mesachachim bu. These are types of thorn bushes, and says the Gemara in the name of Rav Chanan bar Rava that you can use them for schach, because again they are items that grow from the ground. They're detached. They're not mekabel tumah. Should be good to go. Abaye again says, fine, hizmi is good, but behigi lo mesachichin. You can't use higi for schach. And the Gemara says, my tama, the reason being, kevan de natri tarfaihu shavikla v'nafik. These thorn bushes, they get dried very quickly, and very, very soon after you put them on top of the schach, all the leaves start falling into your food and into your sukkah. As you're sitting there, you have a rain of all these things falling down, and you're going to be very uncomfortable. You don't want to sit there, and therefore it would be pasul. Now you have a similar discussion in the poskim for those items that the leaves fall or shrink in the sun very quickly, and you end up with a schach that is more sun than shade, which the Gemara is also going to discuss later on. So, in other words, you have a scenario in which when you put the item comprising your schach, everything is good, but because it's going to drop all the leaves and make it uncomfortable, or because the sun is going to be more than the shade, and you may not notice it. You're sitting there, and you're not measuring the sun and shade every second, and today it could be good, tonight it could be good, and tomorrow by by noontime when you come for Seudah of the morning, it may already be pasul, and you're not measuring it, you're not paying attention to it. So that's something that we're going to see in the unfolding Suggah later on. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav, Hai afkuta de dikla mesachechin behu, afal gav de agidi. These afkuta de dikla is one of the types of palm tree that they had branches coming out, shooting out from the stem, from the bottom next to the ground. And the way it was is that you have a stem coming out, and you have multiple branches parallel growing together, and when you chop down that growth from next to the tree, now you have all of the outcoming branches from that stem with it. So you cut this down, and you have 10, 15 shoots basically that are attached all together, which looks very much like a bundle of wood. Right now, we just learned in our previous Mishnah that a bundle of wood is pasul for sukkah, for schach, right? Because of Gezrat Otzar, because it could turn to be tasev v'lo min ha'asui. So the question is, over here, you have this bundle of wood, so to speak, but they're all coming from one piece that was growing out of the ground. They're natural growth of one shoot coming out, dividing to multiple small shoots out of the ground. Says the Gemara, unlike what you would have imagined reading the Mishnah before of the bundle of woods being pasul, this one is kasher. You could make it for schach. You could you use these, drop them on top of your sukkah for schach. Even though that they are, so to speak, bundled together, says the Gemara, eged bide shamayim lo shemeh eged. This is bundle made in heaven, and a bundle made in heaven is not considered an eged. It's not a bundle. It's one piece, and one piece it is kasher. It's not a bundle. We only care about when you take multiple different things and you bundle them together, that will be a problem. But if something looks like a bundle, but it is really one piece does not get bundled. So the Gemara now says, "Ve'afal gav de hadar agid lehu eged bechad lo shemeh eged." Even if you went and you took straps and you literally bundled the middle and the top of it together, and now it really looks like a bundle, still is kasher, because halachically, if you take one piece of wood and you strap around it, that becomes a bundle. It's one piece. Now this has different shoots from one piece. Still, halacha looks at it as one piece. Therefore, it does not even enter the question of an eged or a bundle of wood that we had in the Mishnah previously. So says the Gemara.
It's one bundle because it's the same object, or
Same object. It's one piece of wood. Now it has different shoots coming out of it, but it is one piece of wood. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Ravina Bar Shila, Hani dukri de kani, mesachechin behu, afal gav de agidi ninhu. This is very similar to what we had before. It's dukri de kani, that they are again pieces of reeds that are attached on the bottom together. It looks like a bundle of reeds, bundle of bamboos, but really they are considered one piece together, and hence is going to be kasher for schach as well. Now says this is the same thing as what we said before, but instead of being branches of dekel of a palm tree, these are the equivalent of that in reeds in bamboos. So says the Gemara, afal gav da'agidi ninhu, even though that they look like a bundle, eged bide shamayim lashmeh eged, it is done naturally by Hashem, and they're one piece really, it's not considered eged, and therefore says the Gemara, "Va'afal gav dehadar agid lehu eged bechad lav sheme eged." Even if you go and bundle them literally together, you bring close the top pieces of this that's growing from one stem, and you bring them, bundle them together, still will be kasher because eged bechad lav sheme eged. You can't bundle up one piece. One piece is kasher. Says the Gemara, Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned this also in Braita. Now these are halachot that Amoraim said, but says the Gemara really is mentioned the Braita also. And here is the Braita. Kanim vedukranin mesachim behu. You read this Braita and you think it means kanim, which means reeds or bamboos. Dukranin would be things that you use to dig the ground. Mesachin bahen. That's how it sounds like. Gemara says, wait a second. Amar Rav Chisda, in the name of Ravina Bar Shila. Oh, this is sorry. I skipped it. The kanim vedukranin mesachim bahem. Kanim pshitas. Gemara kanim is pashut. It can't be that the Gemara is the Braita is telling you that reeds, that bamboos are kasher. So it says the Gemara, Ema kanim shel dukranim. It's talking about the shoots of bamboos that come from one stem. That's what he's talking about, and that the Braita says is kasher. So therefore, this halakha that we just had about the bamboo shoots that are from one stem is really mentioned in a Tanaic source in the Braita as well. So says the Gemara, Ve'amar Rav Chisda amar Ravina. Now once we mentioned something in the name of Rav Chisda that was said in the name of Ravina Bar Shila, we say another halacha in his name, which is absolutely not related to Masechet Sukkah. We're going to borrow a little piece of Masechet Psachim, the halachot of maror in Masechet Psachim. What is considered a kosher maror, right? Hani merirata da agama. If you have a maror that grows in the swamp in the agam, says the Gemara, Adam yotze b'ayni dechovato bePesach. You could use it as maror, right? Now the Mishnah in Psachim has 5 different items that you could use for maror. Right, chazeret would be lechatchila, but you have different items that could be serving as your maror. Now the Gemara says this merorita de agama, the maror that grows up in the agam, the swamp, is kasher as well. So Gemara asks a question. It says mitvi. They ask in the Beit Midrash, ezov. When we have ezov, this is again in Mishnah. That talks about the halachot of tahara, when you have to sprinkle the efer of para aduma, what is the type of ezov that you have to be using for it to be kasher? And says the Gemara, ezov velo ezov yavan. It can't be ezov from Greece, it can't be ezov kuchli, can't be a blue one. Velo ezov midbari, can't be the one that grows in the midbar, in the wilderness, the desert. Velo ezov romi, can't be Roman. Velo kol ezov shesh lo shem levai, and no other ezov that has any additional name. When it says ezov, that's exactly what it means. Ezov, a simple, regular ezov. If it has any additional name, it means it's not the type that we're talking about. Right? When you say ezov midbari, a desert ezov, means it's different than the regular ezov. And we don't want that, says the Gemara. We want regular ezov for it to be kasher. This is the Gemara in Masechet Chulin. So says the Gemara, and it's really a Mishnah in Para Perek Yud Aleph, right? So says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, so the Gemara is comparing the ezov with maror. When the Torah says, Al matzot umerorim yochlu, maror, it has to be a regular maror. It can't be a maror of agam, of swamp. Because if you call that merirata de agma, it means it's not a regular maror. And when the Torah says regular maror, we should learn from this Gemara, this Mishnah in Para, that it should really be a regular, simple maror without any additional names. Because any additional name is telling you, by definition, it's not the regular one. And we want the regular one. Amar Abaye said, Kol shenishtana shemo kodem matan Torah, ubat Torah ve'ikpida alav biyadua sheyesh lo shem levai. If it would be, the name would be given to him before Matan Torah, then when the Torah says the regular one, it's telling you, I want the regular one and nothing else. So any additional name is a problem. But if the name was added after Matan Torah, vehani lo nishtana shmaihu kodem Matan Torah. This, the name was given very recently. The fact that we call this merirata de agama, the maror that grows in the agam, it's a recent addition to just tell you which, where you find this. It's not something that in essence is any different than a regular maror, and therefore, says Abaye, it would be kasher. So says the Gemara, one more additional answer. Rava Amar, Hani Merirata Stama Shmaihu, V'had Dikarehu Merirata the Agama Mishum the Mishtakach Ba'agama. This is a regular daily maror that you find, and therefore, when we call them Merirata Da'agama, is not telling you what type of maror it is, but it is telling you the place that you can find them, the place that they are normally found because of the agricultural system, the way it was with the water, with more water in the agam, in the swamp. That's where you find this type of maror, but not telling you that it is any different than the regular maror that the Torah has commanded. And that basically is the tangent that we took to halachot of Pesach. But now we're going to be back in the sugya of Masechet Succah of what you can and what you cannot use for schach of the sukkah. Hazak Baruch.